Dennis, how are you?
Dom, I'm well. How are you?
I am good. I'm so glad to have you on the show finally.
That's what you say to everybody, Dom, but thanks anyway.
Well, hey, people don't know you are Mr. Soft as Steel, and I think they're going to be curious about how you got that nickname. But that's really what we're going to be talking about today because you did write
Yeah,
that book. And
yeah.
actually, I'm going to stop talking about you, Dennis. Let me say this, Dennis. Who the heck are you, and how do you find yourself speaking to a group of construction professionals all around the world?
Wow, that's a good question. So, who I am as a degreed accountant, went to the University of Maryland in the States, of course. Graduated, became an accountant, worked as an accountant for several years, realized that I was anything but an accountant, and then had the opportunity to move into the consulting side of a very large firm.
Mhm.
And one of my first clients was a construction company. And so I got to dip into the industry really back pre 1980. But when people say how much experience do you have in the construction industry, I say over 40 years. So it's a little less. So I don't have quite as much tenure. Um, so I began working with contractors as a consultant,
Mm.
and I've been working with contractors. I've been a contractor. I've been within a contracting company. I've been a vice president of professional development. I've been responsible for project management, for estimating, for just about anything you can think about in terms of what I refer to as kind of the core competencies or the basic skill areas involved in doing, and making money on contracts.
That's important. Yeah, we
Making
want to
money is
make money.
important, and
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's basically. So I've been in the industry for a long, long time. The last dozen years, I've had a close association with the finishing trades,
Mm.
specifically, and my capacity there has been training them on things like managing projects and estimating. But more importantly, frankly, in my view, and that's where your mention of soft as steel ties into a book I wrote about the qualities of people.
Right.
Is I teach a soft skills workshop, which I do with a fair amount of energy and commitment, because I believe, from my extensive experience, and 40 years, I guess, is kind of extensive,
Mm.
that soft skills are the difference maker.
They really are.
For people to succeed, not only in the beginning of their career, where they learn to understand what they are, hopefully by being able to see through the actions and hear through the words of the people they work for, what soft skills are, and why these good things about a person are so important to communicate to the folks they deal with. And as they grow in their career progression, their soft skills are what's going to get them to become leaders in our industry.
Yeah. I actually, as I was doing research on you, one of the comments about, I think it was one of your speaking events, was a reminder of something I've heard before, but projects are built by people,
Yeah.
right? They're not built by tools. And so often we take somebody who's technically skilled and we say, well, you're really good on the tools. You should be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And those are
Yeah.
different skill sets, completely different.
Yeah.
And that's where you shine. Hey, before we go on too further, you're a member, I think you were an executive on the CMAA as well, right?
I served for I'd say about 2.5 years with the
Yeah,
Construction Management Association of America, CMAA,
right.
as their vice president of professional development. I failed to mention that in terms of my career, but that's one of the stops, and it was a stop that gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about that particular profession, which is increasingly more important in construction, as most folks know,
Yeah.
and met some great people from very large firms as well as very small firms. And as you know, our industry is an industry which is comprised largely of smaller companies.
That's right. Yeah, it is.
Particularly in the trades.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting in a room or standing in front of a room of construction foremen and superintendents and talking to them about feelings, which I do as part of my soft skills presentation, it does get a few interesting initial glances. But
Yeah.
then
We're not going to talk about our feelings today, are we,
no,
Dennis?
we don't need to talk about feelings. Let's just get the job done, So
But you raise an interesting point on that. Actually, one of my clients, who the guy you would look at him and think, huh, one of the Sopranos is walking around, and I
yeah.
should get this guy's autograph. But he's got a heart of gold.
Mm-hmm.
He just looks like
Mm-hmm.
he should be in that show.
Yeah.
Anyways, he said something interesting to me, and he's running a very, very successful business. And he said, Dominic, I've come to realize that our people are our tools,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a maturity in business, I think. And maybe I'll ask you to comment on that, but it's a maturity in leadership and management to understand that it's no longer about the machinery or the tools, the equipment we have on site. The people are actually the tools that run that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the thing is, when I hear an observation like that, I can go to one of two places. The look back and look in the rearview mirror is, if someone says that, the follow-up question has to be, how do you treat your tools? Because again, some folks, on their tools, they're hard on their tools. They toss them in a bag, they drop them. They don't care whether they do the proper safety checks. So there's the whole issue of your tools. My guess is it sounded like your feeling was that he was talking more about how important they are to him.
Absolutely, but you raise a great point. Yeah, but he was saying it in the positive, that he's come to realize that treating his people well and getting the most out of his people is his tool as a leader.
Absolutely, and it's the winning strategy. Contractors that have managed to get through good and bad times, and we're in the midst of it, getting towards the end of a really bad time for folks around the world, actually. But the good times, bad times thing is that the leaders, and again, in most of our contracting firms, those leaders, that key leader is also the owner of the business, or is part of the family that owns the business, because that's, again, the vast majority of contractors. So how they demonstrate that caring about their people, their tools, their resources, if they do it well, then what they understand is that if we get into tough times, I'm going to get the most out of my people. If we get into really good times, where we've got a pipeline of jobs that's unbelievable, we just can't find the people to do the work, and that's one of the steady state. And sadly, steady state problems in our industry is the lack of new talent coming into the industry, and we can talk about that as well. I mean, Don, there's so many. It's huge. I was just in a Zoom workshop yesterday for 4 hours with 32 folks from across North America, ranging from very senior level people in construction companies and unions, as well as folks with just a few years experience. And we spent some time within the topic of diversity and social justice, which is one of the topics that I include to connect the whole notion of the qualities of people, the things that I call soft skills, connect those to what our reality is. And our reality is that there is much going on in terms of the thoughts with regards to diversity and social justice in our time. And we need to find a way to see every individual who is looking for a job, because their job that they lost as a result of the pandemic, and that's what I'm referring to, which is a once in our lifetime situation. I hope. But there are folks that have no jobs to go back to, but may have some basic skills, are interested in working. And so what contractors, and if they happen to be signatory to unions or even open shop or merit contractors, they need to be tuned into, how do we find these people that have no job to go back to, and see if we might be able to find some really good folks there that could come into our trades and help us to build our projects for our customers.
Yeah. And I think too many of us forget, and I'm only one generation away, but my family was new immigrants to the country. And just dying to get a job at one point. And then, got in, as so many of us did, or our families did, and just kept working, with great work ethic and the kind of craftsmanship that you hope for when you hire somebody. So those opportunities exist. We're not that far removed. There's always somebody landing on our shores trying to, make their place in this world, and they're willing to do what it takes to have a good job that they can rely on, so they can feed their family, right?
And the construction industry is not an industry that will ever go out of style. There will always be a construction industry. Now, the big thing about that, just, my automatic add-on to that, is that what is changing is how we do projects, everywhere from the communication tools to basic timekeeping, which are all administrative and overhead aspects, right on down to the tools that we use. We're seeing augmented reality, we're seeing robotics, we're seeing virtual design assist, all kinds of things that are technologies. And the bad news there potentially is that the two older generations in our workforce, some are disinclined to learn about those things. Others, are inclined to do so, but frankly, they don't know where to get the training, and where they can get the training is right there in their first and second year apprentices, who are young people who know how to use things like this gadget, which is used for timekeeping. T-Sheets as an example is one of those applications.
For people who can't see this, Dennis, because some people are listening to this as an audio, but you can watch it as a video as well. And so Dennis just held up this strange machine called a mobile phone, a cell phone. An iPhone,
very
no
strange.
less, I think.
Yeah. And I got all kinds of little buttons on this thing, and I know they do something, but I'm not quite sure what they do. So the thought there again is that's the bad news for the older generation. The good news is the younger generation can help them learn those things, and the trade-off is that older generation, and again, what's happening, I'd like to say with greater frequency, and I think it is, and it varies. It varies in what part of North America you're in. It varies, what sector of construction you're in, what's going on in the local economy. But we are seeing the emergence in a positive and constructive way of programs that are referred to as mentoring programs. And that involves two people, the person doing the mentoring, the highly experienced individual, and the person has less experience. So if you put that template over the relationship between an apprentice and a journey person who's got 10 years experience, who doesn't know how to press any of the buttons on his phone, there's a mentoring opportunity right there. So within the framework of mentoring is the opportunity to turn all of the possibilities for resistance into embracing change and recognizing that while our industry is never going to go away, brush and roller will still be there. We'll be using sprayers for sure.
Hammers, wrenches, we're still going to be using them.
Yeah. It's also, but other things are going to be there too. And we've got to learn how to use them because they aid us in delivering the project in the most efficient way possible. Efficiency translates into lower price. Lower price tends into increased competitiveness, winning work, and making money.
Yeah. Let's make sure we stay on the message of today. What do you want to pass on to, and by the way, the business owners you're talking about are the ones listening to this show right now. It's people who have either started the business, grew into the business, or maybe bought the business, lower number of them.
Yeah.
But they're just good, hardworking people that are trying to get ahead, trying to figure out how to move from chaos to certainty, how to get clarity in their business, how to have it finally running so they can step back and take a breath, but also how to run a safe and profitable work site. So when you hear that that's the audience, what do you want to pass on to them, and what should be the takeaway message for today?
Yeah, well, it could be a very easy short answer, but I'll use a few more words. Individuals who are running their own companies in the construction industry, if they do look in the rearview mirror, they see how the industry operated in decades past, and again to good ends. There's always a place for a contractor that does great work and treats their customer well. There's always a place for them. Those are the contractors that in tough times, if an owner or developer only has one project instead of three, they're going to get that project. And they may get it on a negotiated basis because the owner knows that they will deliver a good product and they will do it in a way which refers to the more of how they are when they're doing it. One of my phrases when I talk about people skills or soft skills or relationship skills is that it's not about your job or what you do. That's the easy part of being a contractor, frankly.
Right.
The hard part of being a contractor is how you are when you're doing it, how you are when you're putting work in place, how you are when you're reviewing a change order and what your rationale is for the number that's on the change order. It's how you do those things. And that's where your qualities come into play. If you do it by just walking in and saying, listen, you SOB, here's the change order, sign it right now or I'm pulling our guys off the job. That may win you the day one time, but the next time that company puts out a job for bid, you're not going to be on the bid list. Because people they want to be treated in a certain way. Again, for decades and eons, people talk about the golden rule, my version of that is that, is about treating people the way they want to be treated. Again, that's a little bit of a different twist, but the point is you can't know how they want to be treated unless you get to know them.
We were just talking about another book, and I know you wrote your book, but you're not going to be surprised at the book I'm about to quote. It's an old book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
And people overlook it, but that's the basic point of it, is try to understand the other person's point of view. And even if you've got somebody in front of you who seems rough around the edges and like and unapproachable, there's a way to talk to that person. There's a way to communicate with that person. There's a tone of language to use, and you're going to figure it out. You're going to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But use the right tone and approach with that person to get the job done. Because the task we have, get the job done.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
we also want to make sure we do that and have good relationships at the end, because like you said, otherwise I'm not going to get the call back. Consumers, our customers, have more power than ever with Yelp and all sorts of hows and feedback reviews that they can leave. They might leave you smiling and just go right to their phone and leave you a horrible review. Well, you're going to have to sell against that for months, if not years.
Right.
So take your time and do it. And think about the human.
Yeah, and if I'm going back and talking to this contractor owner, again, what I say to them when I'm sitting in rooms with them, and again, I'm in sessions with them now virtually, where I've got half the room are our owners. They're there to take project management training or my soft skills workshop,
right.
And one of the most important aspects in terms of improving your ability to be successful in building relationships is understanding yourself. And a lot of folks in my generation, even the Xers, that idea of, well, I know me. I got that part. I guess I need to get you better, but I know me. Well, in the terms that I contemplate the importance of it, sometimes they don't. And that's why I say one of the first step, and I've been asked this in a number of interviews that I've done in podcasts over the last year. What would you tell the person listening to this broadcast to do next in terms of trying to do something with what we've talked about today?
Yeah.
And my answer is very simple. I'm not trying to rush us to the end of our interview, but if you want to stop talking to me soon, that's fine, Dom. You've got the button. Push me, get me off.
I haven't cut you off yet. You're just getting out of steam. You're getting warm.
Well, somebody told me yesterday I was what did they say? I was in a groove. Okay. But I would say to them, learn more about yourself. So the question is, obvious question, maybe, how do I do that? Well, and the answer is simple. There are some very valid, usable, highly informative instruments or tools that you can use to learn more about yourself. And somebody would say, well, so give me an example. Well, a simple example, because it's one of the most widely used assessments globally. There are various versions of it, but they all originate in the work of a psychiatrist back in the 1930s. That's the origins of something that's referred to as the DISC behavioral assessment.
I love it.
DISC.
That is such a powerful tool. I'm so glad that you're referring to that. It's an underutilized. People just don't even know it exists, which amazes me. But,
I've been using it in my work in the construction industry since I first started consulting to contractors from a firm that I worked for a few years after, kind of midway through the first 10 years of my career. And I've been using it ever since. I use the full-blown version, which is an online instrument that the students take before they come to class. In project management, again, it's now a 9-hour virtual program. But the very first topic after the introduction, which talks about the project management life cycle and the critical functions of a project manager and this and that, all that important stuff, the first topic is behavioral style. And I use that instrument, and we look at the report. We talk about the tendencies of the D versus the I versus the S and again, I do it in a very basic way. I know a fair amount about it, but I'm not an expert on. Frankly, I'm not an expert on anything. What I am expert in is listening and learning, and I've done that increasingly better as I've gotten older. So that's one example, and it's hugely valuable because you can do things like take the profiles of an entire natural working group. If you're a 12 contractor business and you got 12 people you keep busy all the time, get a DISC Pro for all 12 of them. You can get a group profile, and you can look at that and understand what's going on and be able to look at the evaluation that you've got in front of you and say, well, that's why Bobby and Joe don't get along.
Yeah. Or that's why this person is always good with customers and this person never gets along with customers.
Right. And I, you may not be able to guess. I can guess about you. You may not be able to guess, but I'm a high I. What a surprise.
What if you were to guess? What do you think I am?
You're a high I, for God's sakes.
I'm a D, I, and then a C. And yes, that's how it's spelt, folks.
Yeah.
D is the driver, I is the influencer. C is, do you
Yeah.
call it compliance? What do you refer to C as?
Conscientiousness.
Conscientious, and then
Yeah.
S is steadiness.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Dennis,
So
one day
are your D and your I at the same level of intensity?
Yeah, they are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they've
Here's one of those things that, again, as a kind of a pedestrian level understanding about the style of behavior, is that when I took the DISC assessment back in my late 20s, I was a D. I was an ID, both fairly intense.
Right.
My D has receded over about 30 years.
So, and for maybe just for a second, this is such an interesting topic because
I don't want to talk about it, Don.
Well,
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. It's your show.
This is a level 9 ninja skill that we're talking about here. I mean, I'm talking about a very high level skill that we're sharing on this show that really only gets talked about in major corporations. Mm-hmm. Dennis, this is not normally shared at the coalface with 5 and 10 man operations. It's just not. And so the fact that people are listening to this, they might be going, what are these guys talking about? D, I, S, and C.
Right.
Actually, I have a funny analogy for that using birds. I don't know if you've ever heard the birds.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I don't remember it, but I've heard it. Just heard it 2 days ago from a person who's been doing DISC. She's a master DISC facilitator, and she's associated with Tony D'Alessandro. And his
Dr.
company.
Tony Alessandro was a guest on here a couple of months ago. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so listen, folks, for people listening, what Dennis is talking about here is behavioral styles, the way people act and interact and react to any situation. Mm-hmm. As a leader, we have to understand how the people on our team act and interact. And when we do, we can use that. We can be a better leader. We can understand why people have certain concerns all the time, and why some people rush headfirst into things, and why other people are more cautious. Why some people will follow a system and do everything that you ask, and then as soon as you try to change it, the short circuiting starts. It's because their behavioral style. Do you mind if I tell you the birds really quickly, Dennis, just to underscore your point?
Yeah. Remind me. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So it's a quadrant, folks. So the D stands for driver, the I stands for influencer, the C stands for conscientious, and the S stands for steadiness. Okay, blah, 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 right? Imagine if these were birds. The D is an eagle. The I is a rooster. The S is a dove. And the C, the conscientious, is an owl.
Yeah, that's right.
And now think about the people that you have on your team. I love this stuff, Dennis. I'm so happy we're on this topic. But think about the people you have on your team, and think about just the owl as an example. Wise, maybe quiet, questioning,
cautious, right?
Mm-hmm. Think about the D, the eagle. What are they like? And those kinds of styles impact your team and how you can manage your team and how they see you as well. Because I think the point you're trying to raise here, Dennis, is it's not just important for me to understand who my team is, but how my team sees me. Because if I'm a driver, if I'm the eagle, then they're going to act a certain way in front of me versus if I'm a rooster, an owl, or a dove.
Right.
How did I do?
I think it's pretty good. Pretty good. No, it's right on point. And I think it made it pick the thread back up in terms of that question. So the DISC profile, I think your listeners are now thinking, well, this sounds pretty interesting. Again, keep in mind, I've been talking with contractors, at the owner down to the apprentice level about their behavioral style. And I've been doing it with, one of the larger building trades unions for a dozen years. So it is kind of penetrating a little bit, and I have to say that when folks come into the class and sit down, they've completed their DISC assessment online. Many of them have actually followed the instructions and printed them and brought them to class, which is always a good thing. But then I'll do a quick little survey. So you've got your report in front of you. How many of you, when you flip through it, and I'm sure you haven't read it thoroughly because it is the particular one I was using when I first said this to folks was like 25, 26 pages. A lot of stuff. It's a wealth of information about you, the person whose name is on the cover, and it's facts. I emphasize that this is factual. This is not some hokey wizardry this is facts. And so I said, well, how many of you read? And your first reaction was, I don't know about that. And a couple of people will raise their hand, and I'll press them a little bit. So, what was it about? He said, I'm not, I don't know. It just didn't seem like me. And I said, well, or do you have a spouse, significant other, or a wife? And they'll typically say, yeah, whichever they have. I said, well, did you let them read it? And they just kind of, they get a little smile. Yeah. And I said, what did they say? Oh, they said it was me. So, and that's true, because it's a very valid way of trying to get a handle on yourself. Because again, as I said, I tell people the first thing you want to do is learn more about yourself, because if you understand yourself, and this kind of takes us into the, because there are two more assessments that I put in my trifecta of assessments, kind of takes you into the second, because there's such a close correlation. And that is that understanding yourself, it revolves around the skill known as self-awareness. And that then takes us into a conversation about another body of knowledge and another aspect of humans and human behavior, and that's emotional intelligence. And so I talk about emotional intelligence in my classes, and I have them do a quick little, what I call an EQ indicator, gives them a sense of their level of emotional intelligence. Because when you marry what you can learn in the body of work about emotional intelligence with behavioral styles, you get the further explanation for why some high Ds are viewed as being rude and blunt, as opposed to being drivers, as opposed to being, aggressive. And it's because of their level of emotional intelligence, which begins with being aware of what's going on with yourself emotionally, your feelings. Yeah. Are you anxious? Are you nervous? Are you mad? All those play into how you present yourself to the folks that encounter you. And you may be a high D, but if you just got a phone call about a tragic accident that involved a close family member, that is not the time that you're going to simply be a driving, aggressive high D. That's the time when you're going to use expletives to respond to a question from someone, because you're so emotionally upset. Mm-hmm. And so the more you can know about yourself, and that's why I add the emotional intelligence, and my icing on the cake, although I think you can do so much with any one of these three, but if you take them all together, it's a powerful battery, is a 360 assessment. Getting meaningful, structured feedback from people that you work for people that work for you, for your equals in an organization, if you're part of a management team, from your customers. And if you take those three and kind of lay them all out, and honestly, with a growth mindset, which is a term that comes out of a book entitled Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you have a growth mindset, you look at that information and say, now, how can I use this to better myself, to improve myself? And how can I use it to communicate with others about me, to help them?
Yeah. So this is a good point. So let me get this for people, because they might be asking, how do I use these tools to be a better manager? Or do you have a case study or a story you can tell? Names erased, of course. Anybody you talk about can be named Fred Flintstone or Wile E. Coyote.
But I know Fred Flintstone. Yeah. No, I've done this a number of times, beginning back when I was just part of the project management team at a large contractor. Again, bringing the DISC assessment into an organization, and again, I did it for the first time probably 15 years ago. And it was a much more simplified assessment, but still comprehensive. It was a booklet. You fill things out. You filled in a grid and paper, and then you got the results. But then using it in a simple but creative way, again, to have the individuals, and this was a 6-member team. To have the individuals, we shared the results. This stuff is not. This is not personal, confidential kind of information. Right. This is information to be shared for the benefit of all who are stakeholders in the outcome of improved relationships, because that really is where this all comes into play. That's why the construction. Yeah.
Could you imagine putting this in place in a family business where you and your brother or you and your sister are always at odds, and you do an assessment like this and go, okay, here it is on paper. When I talk to Judy, I can never say the word trust me. Yeah. And then Judy looks at it and says, when I talk to my brother Jim, I have to give him all the details up front in point form, or he's going to get frustrated. And isn't that one of the end results you get from these tests, is understanding how the other person wants to wants to get
Right.
their info. I
Right.
think about family businesses when it comes to this all the time, because there's so
It's
many.
huge. Yeah. Well, here's the thing is it's pretty straightforward in a sense for folks that understand the basics, and that is that if you move from simply feeling, and if you're dealing with a particular person that you always feel bad, or you deal with another person, you feel like you're on the defensive. You feel again, if you move away from just feeling based on how a person interacts with you, to understanding why, and being able to talk about it using non-inflammatory terms, no profanity, and simply say, here's what this report says. I think it's describing me, and here's what it says in terms of, when I'm dealing with you, given what your behavioral style is, this is what the report is telling me. What's it telling you? And then just kind of talking it all through and figuring out a path forward to say, now I understand. I mean, so adults do this to themselves all the time. We just plow ahead on certain things in whatever manner we do it. And sometimes that plowing ahead is retreating, staying away, not talking to so-and-so or such and such, because every time I do, this happens. Well, so let's give them a framework.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, it's because again, the contracting business is not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. If a full cycle, ground up construction project starts by digging a hole, and then we put something on the top of the building, and then we close it in, and then we finish it out. That's construction, right? It's not rocket science. What makes construction difficult, and this is not going to be a new thought. You know what I'm going to say next time. I should probably stop. But what makes construction difficult is dealing with people. And forgetting that we are, as you said earlier, and actually it was one of the thoughts in my book, and that is that people build buildings. Again, we're a people business, and I've said this over and over in the many talks I've had the privilege of giving. In every interview, I say the following, and that is that we need to remember that it doesn't matter whether you're a contractor, an engineer, an architect, a doctor, a lawyer, a retail store, and I could just go on and on. Every business, even if what you deliver to the customer is an end product, like the finished building, or like clothing in a retail store, every business serves customers.
And customers.
Every business is in the service business, and customers are people too.
Yeah.
And if we recognize that, then we begin to understand why, in a very direct and short format, but using the words and experiences of a cross section of really interesting people, I tell them, I talk in a pretty compelling way about why it's important to understand what qualities you believe are the most valuable to you. Again, because that's what your soft skills are, really your qualities, attributes, behaviors. They're really a manifestation of your personal values. That's what soft skills are. The skill part of soft skills is how those qualities get known to other people and how you learn about other people's qualities, which is in addition to whatever their job function is. Their job function is, again, I say, I don't mean to be so flip about it, but that's the easy part. Because again, and I related to our, in the trades, every trade does at least a good job, and they're actually getting better at it. A good job of teaching the apprentices, the new hires, the basics of their trade, and the way those apprentices get better at those basics is by practicing.
Yeah,
they practice
with all of us, right?
But again, people say, okay, I get that, Dennis, but I don't see how that applies to soft skills. Well, it absolutely does apply, because the most essential skill that's involved in people understanding you and you understanding other people is communication. And communication it has a variety of basic ingredients, but the simplest form of it is that in communication, talking happens and listening happens. So if I'm talking, then I'm hoping you're listening, and there are ways that I can figure that out. And I want to get into the details, but it's not as simple as communication is. Talking is the absence of listening. Listening is the absence of talking, because both of them, if done with purpose, are valuable, practical, learnable skills. And in particular, the one that beginning, most notably with the high D, but it's true just generally of people, the skill that can be improved upon if you understand what's involved with it and are willing to practice it is listening. And listening is and poor communication are the number one cause, in any decent, reputable study you see, the number one cause of conflict. And conflict is a condition that happens in the workplace every day.
Yeah. And I think we see that all the time when we talk about meetings. People avoid meetings, or they say our meetings are a waste of time. And the leaders ultimately know you have to have meetings because your team must communicate. It's humans, it's not robots. Even if it was robots, you'd have to have engineers and technicians who worked on the robots communicating. So we're never getting rid of people. Yes. But our ability to lead and manage, inspire, motivate, educate, train, redirect people, that's what's going to turn you from a good company to a better company to a great company. And that's the task that you're laying out for us here. Yeah. Dennis, if people want to learn more about you and read your book, actually, do you have a copy of it there to hold up for those people watching on YouTube?
Yeah. I have extra copies. That's
I have that problem me. Too. I have that problem right too. There. Soft as steel. Yeah,
soft as steel. Yeah, it's available. It's available in a variety of places, including obviously Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, et cetera, and on my website. And actually, if one were interested in getting a copy, the hard copy, and they ordered from my website, I would personally sign their copy, and I would put it in an envelope and mail it to them personally.
Nice. And what's your website, by the way, Dennis?
My website is Dennis Doran, DennisDoran, Dennis Doran Speaking, SPEAKING, DennisDoranSpeaking.com. And there's a variety. You can also, I'd love to chat with anybody who's listening to this broadcast and wants to talk more about the things I talked about, or wants to tell me I'm just nutted in a fruitcake. I'd be happy to talk to you. There's a button several places on my website that says talk directly to Dennis. You can click on it. You can grab an appointment on my calendar, and if it shows up, I'll be on the Zoom call and be happy to talk to anybody. My email address is in there, all kinds of good stuff. So Perfect. That's how you reach me. And you can find me out in podcast world as well. So, because I've been having some wonderful conversations.
You've been doing a lot of podcasts, yeah.
Yeah, it's in a way, it's I kind of view it as being a proxy for public speaking, which up until recently has been largely shut down, as you know. Yeah. And as the person, do we have a moment? I want to just quickly tell you, share two thoughts with you, including how the book got its name.
Sure. I'd love to know how the book got its name, because I know you have a sense of humor, but
I do not have a sense of humor. So I'm sorry, I do not have a sense of humor. That was
the accountant in you coming out. You've graduated from being an accountant, and now you're a construction pro.
And I'm available for weddings, funerals, and no. But I thought about writing a book probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I had a vision for the book at that time. So I went about doing something which I thought was sensible, which was to see if someone was interested in supporting the project of writing a book. Because as you know, it consumes resources that are also known as dollars, whether they're Canadian or US, doesn't matter. That's money. So it stalled out. And then a little bit of time passed. But through that entire time, I've had a long time personal friend, a very close friend, probably one of maybe my closest friend in my adult life. Was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Oh,
and
sorry.
And she had been, checking up on me regularly. I moved away from the Washington D.C. area. I live in Savannah, Georgia. By the way, I'm saying this at the end of our conversation. So, folks, if they're still listening, I'm talking to you from Savannah, Georgia. But I moved away, but we obviously stayed in very close touch. And she would ask every once in a while, what's going on with the book? And I said, it's on the to-do list. And so literally, I guess now 2.5 years ago, 2019 was the copyright date on the book. Literally a few months before she passed away, she was badgering me. She said, you've been talking about this book, write the frickin' book.
Just do it.
And so I became more focused on trying to do it, and began thinking about the concept or the idea for the book. And it was an entirely different concept than the one I originally had. This approach, I wrote a book that I intended to be something that could be read by everyone from a first year apprentice to the CEO of a global engineering firm. I believe I succeeded with that. And I only know that because of what people have said that have read the book and the people that participated in the research, which was over 60 folks from across the industry. But so I went to a conference out in San Diego that was hosted by a guy named Steve Farber. Steve Farber wrote the foreword to my book and is also my mentor. And on the last day of the program, we were broken into groups, and the assignment for the group was come up with a goal that you want to accomplish in the coming 12 months. So I wrote on a piece of paper, stuck in an envelope. I wrote, write the book. So I made a commitment to do it. And then a matter of a few weeks later, I was challenged with the finance issue. How am I going to fund this project? And then I learned a few weeks later that my friend who had passed away left me money in her will.
Oh, gee.
And to put it in simple accounting terms, that was the working capital that allowed me to get the right professional help, including things like designing this cover, designing the insides of the book,
doing it right.
Everything. So it was done well. Creating my website, all those different things were a gift from her. And
nice.
then I was going to get underway, and I had a conversation with Steve Farber, this getting to the question about the title of the book. So I'm on the phone with Steve, and we're going over some thoughts, and I'm asking him questions. He said, you need to do this, and I think you ought to do that. Giving me very good advice about things that I knew nothing about. I've never written a book. So after about 45 minutes, I said, well, this is great. So I've got a good action plan. I'm going to get with so-and-so. I'm going to get a calendar in place, and this is going to start to happen. He said, well, hold on a second. I said, yeah, what do you got? He said, I got a title for your book. I said, what is it? He said, Soft as Steel. And then his explanation was quite simple. He said, you're talking about soft skills. It's in your primary audience is the construction industry. They'll relate to steel. And you talk about soft skills as being very difficult to learn and appreciate. So the idea of difficulty comes into play, but most importantly, and this is kind of the way he phrased it initially, but I say it in a more embellished way. The reason this title makes sense is that steel is an element in a building structure that creates the opportunity for that building to last a long time. Soft skills are the qualities of leaders and others that allows you to build, maintain, and preserve long-term successful relationships.
What a great that's a great concluder right there. It is it ties everything up so nicely, very beautifully. Yeah.
Thanks. This has been an incredible delight to spend this time with you.
Thank you, Dennis. And I hope people take away what, the core of this message here is that, understand your behaviors, your behavioral style, and understand that those around you, because it, like you said, the soft skills is what holds your company together. Lots of people can use a trowel. Lots of people can turn a wrench. Mm-hmm. It's the people who turn the wrench that make your business different.
Yeah. Right. And so now I've let out the great secret that's to be found in the pages of Soft as Steel. So
perfect.
It's been a delight.
Thank you, Dennis. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.